everyone. Welcome to NAEA's Open Studio conversation on submitting your presentation proposals for NAEA 25. I'm Paula Leese, NAEA's Youth and Pre-Service Program Manager. I'm pleased to present this opportunity for you to learn from and connect to experts in our education. Please utilize the open chat tonight to engage in conversation. Our special guest will join us shortly, but first we want to start by acknowledging that every community's strength and existence are indebted to previous generations worldwide. These ancestors contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to shape the history that has brought us to the present day. It's also important to acknowledge that a significant part of the United States' economic advancement and growth stemmed from enslaved Africans' unpaid labor and forced servitude. We must recognize that people frequently bury this truth. In honor of our elders, both past and present, we pay our respects. I come to you tonight from my home on land originally occupied by the Piscataway people. We recognize the legacy of colonization and the harm caused by the forced removal of Indigenous people from these lands. At NAEA, we take this moment to honor those who came before us, not as a performative task, but as a signal to say, we know that we haven't always done everything right, but are always learning and growing. We invite you to learn more about land and labor acknowledgements and find your local people and tribes by digging into resources shared on the NAEA ED&I Hub and native-land.ca. Open Studio conversations are all about experts in the field, so now I will be introducing them. Please join me in welcoming first Laura Grundler. She is NAEA's Director of Learning and Program Development. She's joining us from Texas this evening. Ray Yang is NAEA's Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Special Initiatives. They're joining us from Washington. Amy Appleton is NAEA's Connected Arts Network Project Director, and she's joining us from New York. And Kendall Crabb is NAEA's Connected Arts Network National Content Manager, and she's joining us from Arizona this evening. Right.
Thank you, Pauline.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today. So we're going to start off with just a couple of questions to this amazing team here. So Amy, what is your best advice for submitting a presentation proposal?
Well, first, I can't believe we're back at that stage again. I feel like we were just at convention and now we're ready to do more proposals. So I'm excited. Let's do it. My best advice would be to print and follow those guidelines. We're going to go over those today. So you have them in front of you. If you're not printing them, just have them right next to you so that you're writing this proposal with those as a guide. Compare your draft to the rubric. So we'll show you what that looks like as well. Edit. Revise, look at your proposal, not just once, maybe with a friend or a thought partner. Be as clear as possible. So try to use some key words or language around your proposal that you might see in the description in the booklet. Think about what your audience is going to want to really zoom in on. And definitely create your draft, not just in the application portal, but in Word or some other note-taking tool first, then copy and paste into the application, just in case anything happens. You always have that. And then when you get accepted, because it's going to happen, you'll know exactly what you proposed the first time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's definitely very, very helpful. Thank you, Amy. Kendall, have you ever been rejected when you've submitted a proposal?
Plenty of times I have been rejected. And I just, every time that happens, you just want to remember that each year is different. There are different reviewers. There's a different size for the convention. So there's more spaces or fewer spaces. And so that means a different average cutoff score, which we're going to talk about more this evening. But really just don't take it personally. I always think, put all of your ideas out there and you'll see which ones work for that year and then just try again next year. Yeah. So don't take it personally. It's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, I was definitely rejected the first couple years. So yes, thank you for that advice. All right, Ray, will I receive any feedback on my proposal if it's not accepted?
Yeah, thanks, Police. That's a great question. I think oftentimes, we submit a proposal, and then if we don't get accepted, we want to know what happened, right? We want to know how I could have done better. Unfortunately, at this time, due to the volume of proposals that NAEA receives, we're not able to offer individualized feedback to each and every proposal that's not accepted. However, I would encourage you, if you're interested, to reach out to folks, say, within your division. We have division representatives and division board chairs, or on the commissions. A lot of those folks are very accessible, and they might be able to help support you in crafting or revising a proposal to resubmit the following year.
Thank you. And Laura, can you change your presentation proposals and presenters once it's been submitted?
The short answer is no. To Amy's advice, Amy had really solid advice at the beginning. Make sure that you take the time to draft and edit in whichever Word or Google Doc or note-taking form that you most feel comfortable in. Take your time, go slow, edit, edit, edit. But once you hit submit at the bottom of our platform, which is called submittable, that's it. You're done. There's no changing. So our advice again is just take your time, go slow, make sure you edit, and do all the things before you hit submit. And we're going to talk about all the things in just a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we just introduced ourselves with just a couple of questions, but I'm really excited to have Laura and Ray really dive into the entire process. So while they're going to walk everyone through the presentation proposal process, and if you have questions, please, please, please ask them in the chat. And thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Paulise, and thank you to Kendall and Amy who are standing by in the chat to help answer questions. Make sure that as you're following along tonight, they're going to also pop in some links. And so if you get to those links, that'll help you follow along with us. And then if you have any questions, make sure to share it with everyone. It'll default to host and panelist, but if you use host and panelist, not everyone will see the chat. So the idea behind an open studio is that everybody participates. So Ray, I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. And so we're so excited to be heading to Louisville, Kentucky for the 2025 NAEA National Convention. I believe this is our first time in Louisville, and the convention will be March 20th to 22nd in 2025. You can see on the screen here, or you should be able to see a QR code that will take you directly to the call for presentations, as well as a tiny URL code or web address that also goes to the same page. And so you'll be able to access and take a look at the submission process there. We note here the submission deadline is July 1st. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, we are really excited because, the convention is very much, what you make it, and our members help to really create the vibe and the feel of our convention. Next slide.
So absolutely, Ray. Members are everything. Without the members, we would have no presentations and we wouldn't have a convention. So we're really excited to share this process with you. And the first thing we want you to do is open up that QR code. And then as you're opening up the call for presentations website there, if you go to submission guidelines, we're going to start with that link. It's a PDF link. And if you open it in your computer, we'll be going through it on the slideshows, but it's always great if you have two screens, maybe you can be looking at that guideline sheet with us and follow along. So it's right underneath that when you open your website for call for presentations, it's the first thing, submission guidelines, and that's what we're going to start with in our presentation today.
Thanks. You can see I've got mine printed out here. You can print out it's a PDF copy, so you can have it on hand when you're working, but it's also available online. And so this guidelines document is really sort of your primary resource when you're trying to put together your presentation. As we noted, NAEA's National Convention is designed by members and for members. And so NAEA is able to provide a really broad range of professional learning opportunities to really inform, inspire, and compel exemplary professional practice supported by timely research. And so this gives you that overall frame. And I think NAEA is really special in that our members really do generate a lot of the content. They help push the research, the curriculum, the resources, and this is that chance to really center the voice of arts educators, whether you're a classroom teacher, museum educator, higher ed, pre-service teacher. This is that professional development that's geared specifically for you. Next
Ray, I've
slide.
got a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many submissions we got last year?
I believe we received upwards of 1,200, close to 1,300 submissions. And I mean, that's a really incredible number. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's a lot of submissions, and each one of those is reviewed by our review panels.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So on this guidance document, on the guidelines, you notice that we really focus on NAEA's strategic vision, our core values, and you can access all of those on our website. So we have some links on here. If you go to arteducators.org and on the About page, you can see the NAEA strategic vision and the core values. We really recommend taking a look at that, as well as looking at NAEA's platform and position statements to gain a better idea of where NAEA stands on a range of topics. And the platform and position statements are representing the voice of the members. Those are documents or statements that have been written and reviewed and vetted by all of our members and then approved at Delegates Assembly, which takes place also at convention before they are then published on the NAEA website. So these documents really just give you a sense of like NAEA standing on a whole range of topics within arts education. But I think the core values especially are really important for you to be able to take a look at and understand where NAEA sees like its core purpose and vision. Next slide.
So if you look at that bottom of that first page, and Ray, will you hold out your printout? I didn't get a chance to print mine, but on the very first page, there's this beautiful little red call out. There you go. And that's really going to tell you what NAEA is looking for when we're looking at all the variety. And when I say we, that's all of the reviewers. We have hundreds of reviewers reviewing these from each of our divisions and interest groups and various areas within the organization. And these are the types of things they're looking for. So they're looking for variety. They're looking for evidence-based and research-based presentations. They're looking for exploration. The idea of exploring research strategies and teaching practices that advance art education. They're looking for inspiration. We want to inspire our other art educators. A lot of us feel like we're in a classroom alone and maybe we're the only art teacher. And so we want convention to be a place that inspires, and it inspires leadership among educators and learners. And so those are some of the things we're looking for. And if you could go to the next slide for me. And then we're looking for important issues. What are some of the important trends and things we're seeing and emerging in the field of art education, and discussion around those things? So panel presentations, things like that, where we're discussing some of the big trends that are defining our field. Standards-based, how are we using curriculum design and assessment design in support of the art standards, our national art standards? Hands-on. Art educators love hands-on experiences. That's who we are. We want to learn new skills. We want to have those opportunities to try out new techniques. And then current solutions. What are some solutions to all of the diverse ideas and issues within our classrooms and within the field of art education? Next slide.
Okay, so let's get to some of the basics. Number one, if you're going to submit a proposal for the NAEA convention, you are required to have an NAEA membership. And that's for all presenters as well as co-presenters. And you need to have that membership active at the time of submission and also at the time of presentation at the 2025 NAEA National Convention. Memberships do last for 1 year. So actually, if you started a membership now, it would still be valid through the convention next year. And so that would cover you for the entire cycle. We're also using a new submission platform. I know it might seem like we're changing platforms or kind of moving back and forth, but we are really excited for this one. And we're also planning to really stick with this submission platform. It's called Submittable. And so if you go to arteducators.submittable.com/submit, you see that on the screen. You'll get to this screen that you'll see here. It's the online platform that NAEA is going to be using to collect and review proposals. And so after you select submit, besides the call for proposals, it's going to ask you to sign up to create your free submittable account before continuing. So we're going to go on to the next slide. The submittable platform, submission platform features a couple of things. Once you create the account and then log in, it's going to take you straight to that call for proposals or call for presentations portal. And while you're working on it, you can save and log out before submitting. So you don't have to do it all in one shot. You can use a save draft feature at the bottom. And what I think is going to be most exciting about this is that once you have an account, you'll be able to see all NAEA open calls. And so we are currently in the process of the call for the board president as well as division board positions. And so if you're someone who is interested in leadership, who's really excited about being able to have your voice heard on the NAEA board, this is your chance. So you can submit there and you don't have to create another account. You'll be able to use your submittable account to help to submit for those calls as well. Next slide.
So as Ray said, both presenters and co-presenters have to have their NAEA membership current, both at the time of submission and the time of presentation. So we're going to give you a few details about how to work with a co-presenter. And one of the big things is verify that they're willing to be included in the presentation. You know, I know we all have great teaching friends, and we're like, oh yeah, they're going to present with me, but you need to double check. And so make sure they're willing to be included in the presentation, verify their membership is current, and then you need to collect some things from them. You'll need to get their first name, last name, their email address, and their NAEA member ID. It's really important. One of the nice features about Submittable is that it also offers you the option of adding a collaborator. So you could make one of your co-presenters a collaborator on Submittable. So when you go to the Submittable, there's a question, would you like to add a collaborator in this form? And if you click yes, it goes to instructions that on the site that show you how to add that collaborator. It's very intuitive and easy. So the limits on how many presentations I can present and how many that I can be a co-presenter on, you know, sometimes it might seem like somebody's in like so many presentations, but a member may submit multiple presentations, but can only be accepted for 2 as the lead or principal presenter and 2 as a co-presenter. That excludes business meetings. So let's say I'm a division chair, I might have a presentation and a business meeting. The business meeting doesn't count against me. But remember, you can only present in a total of 4 at convention and 2 as the lead or principal presenter and 2 as a co-presenter.
Okay, so moving on, we want to talk about the delivery method. So all presentation proposal submissions are for in-person presentations in Louisville, Kentucky. So that's to be at the convention and presenting in person to our membership. There's going to be no hybrid live or pre-record presentation option this year. That's a slight shift. So obviously at the start of the pandemic, when we moved all things online, we were doing a lot of virtual presentations. As we came back in person and when we were in New York, we recognized that some folks travel to in-person convention was not possible. In-person presentations weren't something they could do. And so we wanted to try to, in the in the service of equity and access, accessibility, make sure that there were other options. So we did have hybrid live presentation options and pre-record options, but we've also seen a really significant decrease in the number of members who are accessing those resources. And so, we were spending a lot of time, energy, and capacity on building those things out. And fortunately, at this time, that was really stretching the staff thin. And so this year, there won't be a live hybrid or pre-record presentation option. We are looking at recording sessions in person. So like in-person sessions recorded there and then made available to members after the convention. So you'll still be able to watch some of those sessions, but that's a slight change. Important dates to note. July 1st, 2024 is the submission deadline at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So all submissions must be in by that time. And then we are notifying all folks of acceptance by August 16th, 2024. So that gives us time to put the presentations through our reviewers, and then also looking at what's available, what we can actually fit into the convention site and also times, and then sending out acceptances. Next slide. All right, so as you're starting to write the proposal, these are the sections that you'll actually be working on. So number one, the title of your session or workshop. We do ask that you don't put any identifying information or names or anything like that. So we wouldn't want to have like, Ray Yang presenting for NAEA on this specific topic. We want sessions to be able to be judged based on the content, and so not on names or things like that. But you also want it to be kind of, succinct. We'd also encourage that you don't use buzzwords or try to like dive too much into that when you're working on the session. But it's a 15-word limit for that title. You're then going to submit the primary presenter and co-presenter information, and you're going to need the name, email address, and NAEA member ID number for each of those things. And then session type. This is a slight change from previous years. So we're really trying to call out business meetings to go under a separate track, and then session workshop proposals. So business meetings, also to note, are only for commissions, interest groups, and division leaders. So if you're thinking you want to put on a session that's to run some kind of business or something, that's not actually what it's meant for. It's meant for the ongoing business of some of these currently established NAEA groups. So you would select that only if you're a part of a commission, interest group, or division. Otherwise, you're going to select session workshop. Next slide.
I just want to note that there's a lot of questions in the chat, and Amy and Paulise and Kendall are working to answer those questions. But additionally, we will answer questions at the end of the presentation as well. So they're capturing questions, and we'll come back to them at the end. As Ray alluded to, so once you've chosen your business meeting or your session track or your workshop session, you'll choose that, which almost everybody will choose the option of a session, not a business meeting. Very, very few people will choose a business meeting because it doesn't apply to you. So once you've chosen session, you're going to need to choose a session track. It's a lot of sessions in a row. And you'll choose one of the three options, either your division, an interest group, or an area of focus. And this is really important because this is where we're going to have the reviewers selected from. So if your session applies to your division, so either elementary, middle, secondary, higher ed, pre-service, supervision, or museum, you can choose that. Or we have 22 interest groups. So if you belong to an interest group and your session applies to a topic within that interest group, that's an area that you can choose. Or lastly, you can choose an area of focus. And there's 4 areas of focus, which are research, leadership, ED&I, and media arts. And those areas of focus come from our strategic vision. Next slide. The next part is, I think, where people often get confused too. And what I'm going to say is that when you choose your session format, that's different than choosing your track. So you're going to choose your track and then you're going to choose a format. What this means is the layout of your presentation. And it's either going to be a lecture or an interactive session, or it'll be instructional support, workshops, and demonstrations. And there are different types within there. This is really where you need to read through those guidelines. The guidelines explain which each of those different types are. It tells you what the room setup will be, and it will tell you how long the presentation would be. So it's really important that you take time to dive deeply into this section of the guidelines and choose wisely, because it'll impact the type of room layout and how long your presentation is, and it'll help guide folks to your session actually. So make sure you take time to read this section in the guidelines and follow it carefully.
Thanks, Laura. And then something else new this year that we haven't done before is to include keywords. So one of the things that we've noticed and heard from some of our members is that it's difficult to kind of get a sense of what the sessions are. We do have tracks and things to note, and especially those help for reviewers, but new this year is the option to select multiple keywords that will help guide the scheduling of the sessions as well as the participant experience during the convention. So keywords are not included as part of the session adjudication. So like that's not going to actually influence the review of your proposals. And so that won't impact the overall assessment. You can select multiple keywords for your sessions, and these are going to be things like, you know, if it's like early childhood, or if we're talking about ED&I, you know, or this kind of range of stuff, just to help people get a better sense of like, oh, this is actually what this session is on. Next slide, please. Additionally, as you're moving through, you're going to start to talk about the statement of purpose and outcomes. And so when we're writing about that, you really want to be able to give some specific info and feedback about the intentions, goals, and the anticipated outcomes of your session. So say, you know, you're doing something on like a printmaking project or poster project for your students, you would talk about like the goals were to be able to talk about the actual techniques, then the impact on the students and any outcomes, you know, things that the students experienced, and then what the participants at the session might get to, because maybe they walk away with like your lesson plan or curriculum or something else, right? So the more specific you can be around the statement of purpose and outcomes, the better that is to communicate to the reviewers. Under organization of content, we're looking to understand, you know, what the outline of the presentation is. More examples you can give, the better, and any kind of supporting evidence, you know, to say that you've got lesson or unit designs, if there are any specific narratives you want to offer, or if you're going to be talking about, say, like an exhibit or community event. All of these things help us just get a better sense of like what exactly the proposal is on. Each of these things have a 100-word limit. Next slide.
So the next portion that you'll be writing is the relevance of the topic. That is really about how it pertains to the field of art education today, how it pertains to the division or the interest group. It's important to include details and make sure that you're thinking through, how am I connecting to the field of art education, other art educators, and to the community? And then the next portion is the impact on practice. So how does this promote the best practices in art education? How does it provide enriching professional development for other art educators across the field, pre-K through 16, museum educators and teaching artists all alike? And those two sections also have a 100-word limit. Again, to this and to the portions that Ray was talking about before, we really suggest that you take your time in drafting this and check your word limit and all of those things before you start putting your paragraphs into submittable. The next section that's really important is another 100-word limit, and making sure that you're careful about cultural appropriation, that you're promoting best practices that guard against cultural appropriation, that you're demonstrating insightful, competent, and respectful approaches to all content. It's very important that you're very thoughtful in that section. And if you need more information about cultural appropriation, you can go to the ED&I Hub on arteducators.org. The next portion is the brief description, and this is really important. Instead of being a 100-word limit, it's only a 50-word limit, and it's published in the printed program, the website, and the mobile app. So this is your attention getter. This is the section that all convention goers will read. And this will be the part that's like, I want to go to that presentation because this sounds amazing. So consider that important part because that's the one that's going to be published in, again, the printed program, the website, and the mobile app.
I just want to note too, Kendall dropped into the chat access to the Inclusive Practices Presenter and Presentation Guidelines. That's a really amazing document that was crafted in collaboration with NAEA's Disability Justice Interest Group. And so they worked with us to really consider ways to improve access in person at the convention, to do, specific practices around things like closed captioning or, when you're speaking during the session. That document is a really great tool, and we really encourage folks to look at that while they're drafting their proposal and afterwards, if they're accepted, to think about how they actually put together the physical in-person presentation. So let's talk about the actual proposal review process. The process is a blind review, so we take names and identifying information off so that that doesn't influence our reviewers. The peer review process is by proposal review committees comprised of NAEA members, so current NAEA members, and they're formed annually. So it's not always the same group of people who are doing it. There's obviously some overlap, but we try to bring in new members or other folks, and they're members associated within this specific track that that's being represented. So if there is something that's been submitted under the elementary track, we would bring folks who are part of the elementary division, interest groups. If you're doing something that's part of, say, like media arts, or one of the other groups, that we bring members from that interest group, as well as the area of focus. So our ED&I and research commissions also do a really great job of helping to review all submissions. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, reviewed by peers of similar interest. Each proposal has at least 3 reviewers, and they have their scores averaged for one overall score. We try to really norm things to a common benchmark. And so after all the scores are put in, and each proposal is rated on a scale of 1 to 4, the rubric is actually also available in the guidance document. You get a score of 1 to 4 on the statement of purpose, outcomes, organization of content, relevance of topic, impact of practice, and cultural appropriation. One thing we do want to note for folks, we try to do a consistent percentage of the proposals from each track that are accepted. And so what that means is that, if there's say a smaller interest group or a smaller area of interest, that there will be fewer proposals from that, but not because of quality or anything like that, but because we take a percentage. So you'd see here in track A, if there were 200 total proposals and say we were accepting at a 40% rate, that means that there would be 80 proposals accepted from track A. In track B though, where there are fewer proposals, 10, we'd be accepting 4 presentations from that track. So we try to really balance things out as a percentage, and not overwhelm it on and say oh, just because it's this topic we're going to take more from this specific area. So there's no weighting in that way. I believe next slide.
Having frozen computer problems. I'm sorry, everyone. And I was trying to answer a question in the chat, which I'll get back to in a minute. But as we, do a recap, what we really want to emphasize to you is that you print and utilize the guidelines document. It's very detailed and very helpful. It has check boxes, so you can literally check off each item as you do it. And then utilize the presenter resources. Ray was just talking about the inclusive practices document. That is an amazing document. And then the platform and position statements, NAEA strategic vision, and NAEA core values. Those are all linked. Actually, if you open the guidelines document on your computer, there's a lot of hyperlinks in that document. So just know that you can get to it pretty easily through that document. Ensure that your membership is current. Remember, you cannot submit or present if you don't have a current membership. So it has to be current at the time of submission and current at the time of presentation. And then lastly, ensure that all of your co-presenters are current members and they've agreed to present. Because once you've submitted, you can't change anything. So no names can be added or changed after submission. Make sure to list as much accurate information as you possibly can. Again, to the question I asked right earlier, we had over 1,200 proposals last year. We're only able to take somewhere, I want to say around 480, something like that. Well, I know it was close to 500, but it's really hard to manage all of this information if it's inaccurate. So make sure that you're as accurate as possible. Next slide. In the guidelines document, actually, I'm just gonna say, follow that guidelines document. It is golden. It's a great document. Thank you to everyone on our team that really worked hard on tightening it up this year. But make sure that you're thinking about, it does say this in the guidelines document, but make sure that nowhere in your submission you have an identifying name or institution. So those boxes where you have to write the 100 or 50 words, like organization of content, statement of purpose, relevance of topic, it has to be, this is a blind review. So make sure you don't have that in there. Review each component so carefully and match it up against the rubric. So we have a picture of the rubric from the guidelines document right there. Make sure you're matching it up. Like, read your statement and then read that rubric and see where you feel like it fits in a 1 through 4. And then, as good writers and good artists, it's an iterative cycle, right? We're always improving. So get a partner to read your statements before you submit them. Get someone else to run through the rubric and see, like, do they feel like it hits a 3 or it hits a 2, or, where does it fall? And take your time on that. This is not due till July 1st. So you have some time. A lot of people are getting out of school now. So hopefully you're going to have a little bit of time for some think time, and just take your time. The last thing we're going to say is pick the track that best suits you. I saw in the questions earlier, can I pick my grade level? Yes. So the divisions really are somewhat by grade level. So there's elementary, middle, secondary is our high school friends. There's higher ed, and there's museum, and there's supervision. So your fine arts, supervisors, those kinds of things. So you can pick the different tracks. You can think about, is it better suited for one of those 4 content areas like research or media arts, and then an ED&I, or is it better suited for an interest group? Am I a part of an interest group and I want it to be looked over by interest group leaders? So again, just take your time, look through that guidelines, use the checklist, use the rubric, and get some friends to read your work before you hit submit. Next slide. You ready for questions, team?
So we want to give some time for questions. I know that there was sort of related to what Laura had talked about earlier too. Like, I think someone was asking, like, can you select multiple grade level tracks, right? Or multiple topics, what if it expands across different things? We hear that. We're trying to refine the process a little bit. It's a little bit challenging right now because things are reviewed by the specific divisions or interest groups or areas of interest. And so we have to send it to some group, right? And we don't have one that kind of covers across K-12 or anything like that. So choose, again, the one that it fits best with. You can also, if it's accepted, you can always include under your keywords that it is, it's for, say elementary, middle, and secondary. But yeah, at this point, we're not able to do something that's kind of cutting across all ranges. But we are working on it. We're trying to think about this process, and we're also trying to not necessarily make too many changes too quickly to the process.
Yeah, Ray, I believe if you go under keywords in submittable, I'm looking it up right now, that we have the different areas. So you could pick, I think that there's all grade levels, grade range K through
Oh, is
12.
there? Okay, great. All right, great.
So so there's grade range early elementary or early childhood, grade range elementary, grade range K through 12, grade range middle and high. So we did add that, although we can't choose it as a track, we added it under keywords to help.
Yeah. Yeah, so other questions. I know there's been stuff coming through the chat. I don't know.
So
Let's see, yeah.
I can I'll ask some questions and then you can all
Yeah,
answer those
perfect.
in the chat. So someone asked in section 8, supporting evidence, is that an attached document or just a written mention? And if you are accepted, do you submit your finalized presentation prior to the conference to ensure it's meeting the expectation?
I just answered that in the chat, so I'm happy to take that. It is another 100-word box. And so it's underneath that references into the organization of content section. So it's 100 words that you're writing, and we want you to try to add supporting evidence for your presentation topic and your ideas there. But again, it's hard because it's 100 words. So read carefully that organization of content and think through that, and then think where you can reference supporting evidence. And what was the second question?
If you are accepted, do you submit your finalized presentation prior to the conference to ensure it's meeting the expectations?
In an ideal,
I can take that. Yeah, I wish we could very much. Yeah, I think that's what Laura was about to say. We wish that we could review every single one, but as she also mentioned, we are talking about 500 plus presentations, and so NAEA is not able to, with its current capacity, review all presentations before the convention. And so no, they are not. You don't have to submit them and have them reviewed currently.
And somebody had asked, what is the convention theme?
we don't do convention themes.
We have in the past. We're not currently. Yeah.
We have not. Yeah, for the last many years, we have not had. I can't think of the last one maybe, but we do not have a convention theme this coming year for Louisville.
Thank you. Is it possible to select all of the grade level divisions for a presentation?
So I think that was the question that we were answering earlier. You cannot select all in your track selection, but you can in the keywords. So, do the best picking it's hard, but pick the division track that best fits you, but then also use the keywords.
Yeah, I noticed someone in the chat mentioned that they thought the hardest part for them was choosing which track is best, especially if it spans multiple areas. Yeah. Somebody asked if they wanted to craft a submission geared towards early career educators, would it be appropriate for pre-service track?
Yeah. Yes.
I think you could answer that one, Paul-Lise.
Yeah, so definitely I think pre-service and early career art educators, their professional development needs are very similar, so it would definitely be an appropriate track. What track is best for doctoral students in art ed who wish to present?
I have two thoughts on that. So as a track, I would say higher ed. Depending on what the presentation's about. I mean, so that's, without knowing what the presentation idea is, that it's hard to say, but I would lean into the the higher ed first. And then the other piece of that is if it's about a paper, we do have underneath our formats a paper presentation. So for those folks that are writing theses or, you know, their doctoral paper for their PhD, you can present under paper presentation in the format, the session format.
Another question, you referenced the percentages associated with tracks. Is that listed somewhere? So I think Ray, I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please? It cut
So,
out for me for a second there.
The references, you referenced the percentages that were associated with tracks. So they were just,
Yes.
that's listed anywhere.
I don't believe it's listed on the website, but it's in this presentation and that'll be shared. That percentage was just an example. Each year it's a little different and it depends on the capacity of the site that we're going to. So, you know, even though I said 40%, that is not necessarily a guarantee that that's what the total is going to be. So we'll know that after we get all of our presentations in.
I'd also add that it also depends on how many presentations we receive for each track. It's a little bit of math and trying to figure out how many of each track that we can take, and also then we have to pair that up against with how many rooms and time slots we have. It's the biggest master schedule that you will ever see. For those of you that have ever done a master schedule in a school, it's crazy.
Thank you. Are we more likely to get our proposal approved if we have co-presenters from multiple organizations, or is it okay to focus on creating a session with educators from just our one institution?
Well, but since we don't add identifying information into the proposals, it does not make a difference. So whether you're bringing folks from all over the place or whether everyone is from the same institution, it's really based on the merits of the proposal. You know, like after the fact, when it, you know, when it's listed, sometimes folks might like look at that as a factor of what sessions to attend, but it's not a factor in the actual review process.
What track would you suggest if you're a museum, but you're presenting a resource that's meant for classroom educators, not museum educators? Is the track meant to reflect the audience for the session or the presenter's background that is matched to the reviewers?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I think my instinct would be that it should be related to the audience that it's intended for. So, you know, if you're a museum educator, but you're doing something that is very specifically for a classroom, you know, you'd want it to be reviewed by classroom educators. I mean,
Yeah.
but if you're accessing museum resources, right, then it might still stay in the museum track. So my instinct is to say that you should go with who the audience is. Laura, what do you think?
I know, I fully agree. I that's one of the best questions I've had in a while. And I agree completely with that because you really want the reviewer to be the type of audience that you're trying to reach.
Thank you. Somebody asked if there is a retired group track.
So that's one of the 22 interest groups. We have the retired art educators, and that's an interest group that you can belong to. And absolutely, you could choose that as your track for that group.
And someone asked, does having a creative, fun title help? Questions coming from someone who does not feel fun and creative with titling presentations.
I like that.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'd say it doesn't hurt, but also, you know, the title is just one piece. You know, the content's got to be there as you're working on your session, and so, you know, a catchy title might, you know, get someone's eye, but after that, we need to see that there's actually some content or real, like, you know, meat behind the title. So.
Absolutely. Great questions.
Yeah, I think that concludes all of the questions that we haven't yet answered that were posted in the chat, unless I'm missing everything. All right, great. So
Oh, Lisa, I'd just like to add that if we didn't answer something and you're having a struggle with it, and you've looked through the guidelines and you've looked through Submittable, you can reach out to any of the programs team and we'll point you in the right direction. If we can't answer the question, we will make sure we can get the question answered for you.
that's great. Definitely great advice. And if people need to reach us, if you're not sure where you can find our email, if you search the NAEA website, we have a staff directory and you can kind of search, and we have a whole programs team. So everyone here is listed there.
And Kendall just popped it in the chat for everyone.
Before we wrap up, any final thoughts or words or perspectives from any of our programs team members?
Just thank you.
And what I'll say is, even if you're just considering putting in a proposal, I'd really encourage you to submit. I think even going through the submission process, and even if you're not selected, it's always helpful because it kind of maybe helps to kind of solidify or fine tune your thinking. And presenting, I think, is a really great experience. I remember presenting my first time as a grad student, and just to be at a convention and experience it. I hadn't been to NAEA before. It was really awesome to be there and to speak and see people who are actually curious or interested in my my work. And even since then, I still get really excited and nervous when I'm presenting, but it's really cool to be able to be part of the convention.
And to my thank you, there is no convention without presenters and without proposals. So every year, we do our best to craft and curate the best convention we can, and the members do the reviewing. There is one last question that just popped in about if they're reviewed in order. No, they're not reviewed in order of receival. It's really broken up against everyone is reviewed by 3 different reviewers, and it's kind of all mixed up. It's like, I feel like it's like I don't know what the word would be, but they are not in order. So, but again, thank you, because without you and without our members and our board and our division leaders, we wouldn't have a convention. And so we really appreciate you being a part of this process.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. So I just want to wrap up with a few important updates, just things that if you might not be aware of all of the amazing things that NAEA does. Convention is just one of the many things that NAEA is a part of, especially our amazing programs team here. So upcoming open studio conversation, we actually have one on June 20th. I know somebody mentioned pre-service earlier in the chat. So this is actually a open studio conversation directed for pre-service and early career art teachers. So it's balancing act strategies for pre-service art educators to thrive as artists and instructors. So knowing that being an art educator is a balance of both of those. So that is coming up on June 20th. You can register via the Professional Learning Studio. We also have upcoming webinars. So June 5th, we have Addressing Teacher Recruitment and Retention webinar. July 10th, Connecting Creativity and Conservation, an overview of eco art education. Fiber Arts for All, Radical Transformation, Collaboration and Fun through Social Impact Video Game Design. And Disability Studies and Art Education, Reframing Student and Teacher Engagement. So these webinars, we have, as you can see, one every month. You can register online. They are free for NAEA members. Some additional NAEA benefits just to connect you to your global visual arts community. So NAEA is the largest visual arts education organization. So we have the webinars, convention. We also have National Art Honor Society, awards, publications, and school arts for leaders. You can access, so we still did have some pre-recorded and recorded sessions from our recent convention in Minneapolis. If you register today, you can access those over 90 recorded sessions through August 31st. And we hope that you can join us in Louisville, March 20th through 22nd. So we encourage you to register now to save the most, to get that early bird discount rate. And another program of NAEA is the National Art Honor Society and National Junior Art Honor Society for high school and middle school art educators. So if you are a middle school or high school teacher and are interested, please check this out. We have a lot of really great programming coming up for students, and especially student leadership. So we encourage you to take a look. So thank you so much. Content from this town hall, the recording and links will be available on the Professional Learning Studio at learning.arteducators.org. So thank you all for being here today.